Nicole here with Job Hunt Solutions, and today's Thursday, which means it's viewer question and answer day. So I've received a number of questions about the timeline and the time frame during the recruitment process. And these questions I've received at different sort of stages in the recruitment life cycle. So to answer these questions, let's take a look at the recruitment life cycle in general. There are 5 main stages to the recruitment life cycle from the organization's perspective, and they are need identification, sourcing, screening, selecting, and onboarding. Now, the need identification phase is really sort of when the organization gets approvals and identifies that they have a need to hire someone, and they get their marketing materials together, such as job ads. Similar to what you as the job seeker might do in terms of figuring out what type of role you're looking for, what type of organization you want to work for, as well as getting your marketing materials together, such as your resume and covering letter. So the clock doesn't really start until the sourcing stage. The clock ends, on the other hand, just before the onboarding stage, so right at the candidate selection stage or offer stage. So for the purpose of this video, I'm going to really just focus on the sourcing, screening, and selection stages of the recruitment life cycle. On the inside, this overall process should take about 6 weeks. And I realize that it can be much longer than that, and sometimes even shorter. But sort of the guideline is that it takes 2 weeks to source, 2 weeks to screen, and then 2 weeks notice. So if we break this down even further, if we just look at the sourcing piece, most times organizations, again as a general guideline, will post a role for 2 weeks, and that's their sourcing stage. Not only are recruiters receiving resumes and applicants for a role, but they're also potentially actively recruiting it out in the market, networking and speaking with potential candidates for the open position. Now, there are a number of factors that can make this stage longer or shorter. Some of those factors could be if it's a unionized organization and based on their collective bargaining agreement, they may need to have it posted for much longer or even a shorter period of time. Sometimes the recruitment systems are such that they're just set up that way, that a role becomes unposted or unavailable after 2 weeks. In other cases, it could be recruiter preference, and the list goes on. So knowing this, it's just a really good idea if you do see an opportunity that's posted and it's been posted in the last few days, it's better to apply to the role sooner rather than later, because you just don't know if that role might not be posted any longer. Now the next stage is screening. Now as I said, if a role is still posted, sometimes recruiters will continue to receive resumes until the role has been filled. So these stages can overlap. But during the screening process, this is where recruiters are doing their telephone screens, inviting people into interview, etc. Now I know I said that this stage typically takes about 2 weeks as just a general guideline, but it actually can last much longer than that, and it can vary greatly just depending on a number of different factors. So things like the level of the opportunity, how many interviews are going to be required by the organization, and the availability of everybody, including the interviewers and the job seeker. Although most organizations would like to have this stage wrapped up in about 2 weeks, it can sometimes take as long as 4 weeks for this particular stage. So that takes our 6-week guideline now to 8 weeks. The final stage is the selection stage. Now, as I said, this can take typically about 2 weeks. So this stage actually begins when an offer letter is presented to the successful candidate. If a person's working, of course, they're going to need to give their 2 weeks notice, sometimes longer, but typically 2 weeks. Of course, in other countries like England and other parts of Europe, this stage, the notice period could be as long as 2 months, but in North America, Canada, and the US, the guideline is about 2 weeks. During this time, of course, a person has the opportunity to review the offer letter, and there's likely going to be some sort of background checks that are done. Most organizations will do, a criminal check, sometimes education verification, and depending on the role, there might even be a credit check. In the US, it's more common to see people having to go through drug tests. In Canada, we don't have that. So all of these moving parts are working together at the same time as far as the background checks and people accepting their offer. But anything can happen during this stage. If, for example, a background check doesn't go through according to plan, then there are instances where job offers are rescinded by the employer. In other cases, a candidate or job applicant may receive a job offer and then get a counter offer or another offer from another potential employer and not accept the offer to begin with. The organization in that case then has to go back to the candidate pool and either start from scratch or go back to the people that they had interviewed in the past. So as you can see, this overall recruitment life cycle on the inside should take about 6 weeks. The reality is it could probably take more like 8 to 12 weeks for a person to actually go from being a job applicant to a new hire within an organization. Other factors to consider would be things like seasonality, which can change some of the timelines as well. But hopefully this will be really helpful. So just know when you're applying to a role, it could take a couple of weeks before you even hear anything. Some organizations don't send out rejection letters to people until they actually have an offer signed, accepted, everything is signed, sealed, and delivered, and then they'll let everybody know what's going on with the role. So if sometimes you find it a little bit frustrating, just knowing what to expect during each of these stages and throughout the recruitment process may help sort of manage some of those expectations for you. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any other questions, have any video ideas, or would like to collaborate, I would love to hear from you. Of course, you can reach me on email, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever works for you. For personalized advice, of course, come on over to my website. I'd be happy to help. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, happy hunting!